Later. In the meanwhile, it's also election season, in case you hadn't noticed. Even around here, for example, with candidates declaring their intent to run for various offices. And Jennifer Bowman at the Battle Creek Enquirer is back with us to talk about that today. You have the whole list, I presume.
The list so far, yeah.
Right.
The names are coming in.
Was joking a moment ago that this weather forecast is like Jennifer's native San Diego for the next several days.
I'm not complaining.
Do you miss that weather?
Oh, of course, especially around January, February. But then I check my rent bill every month, and I'm like, I'll live.
Yeah, the cost of living is slightly different here than there, isn't it?
Makes sense. But
I was just talking to Diana Stamper there before the top of the hour. Before we went on there, she just came back from there and said it rained for the first time in 10 years or something.
Yeah, they never get rain.
Well, California, that's the El Nino thing. They've been getting the rain this year. Well, we get the warmth, so that's okay with us. So let me just ask you what you think the most interesting matchup here is so far in local races, and we'll start with that.
I think always you keep your eye on the state house races that we have. So I think I think you're going to see a lot of lobbying and a lot of campaigning from the Democrats, and they want this seat back. It's usually a Democratic district, and Bison's looking for another term, and he won pretty handily in his first election. So I think that will be the most interesting one. He tends to raise a lot of money, at least if you look at his first election, and I think the fact that Democrats are looking to get this district back, you're going to see a lot of money come from Jim Hodsma's side as well. Right.
It seems as though he's a stronger candidate than those Bison faced the first time around.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because Bison was his first elected office, the first time you saw him run for public office. And so while he was known as a Battle Creek doctor, it was the first time you're seeing him wanting to be a public official. And so he went against Andy Hembolt, who had experience as an elected official, still young, and it was interesting to see how he won pretty easily in the primary and in the November election.
Mm-hmm. So, and the notion is incumbents have momentum anyway. But nevertheless, we presume this second time around might be a little bit more difficult.
Well, yeah, you're dealing with Jim Hodsma, who I think one of the first columns I wrote when I started working here was the joke I heard was he has like 14 clones walking around Battle Creek because you see him everywhere.
Uh-huh.
He's considered a longtime Calhoun County commissioner. He's been on the county board for some time and is really involved in the community. So he's a familiar name, a familiar face. And he might be able to really raise the money necessary to take on Bison.
Mm-hmm. All right, and when we come back in a minute, we'll talk about some of the other races and candidates who are declared, and that's coming up on WBCK 8:30. WBCK, Jennifer Bowman's here from the Battle Creek Enquirer. We're talking about, local races in various areas over the course of the next few weeks. I'm sure some of these will be shaping up. Some of them already have. We were just discussing the Battle Creek state representative race, and now that Jim Hodsma's in the mix of that, there's going to be a county board vacancy.
Yeah, that definitely leaves a seat open. It's up for grabs, District 3 for the county board, which again is usually a Democratic district. And right now there are 2 Democrats who have filed, Nathan Grajek, who is on the Battle Creek Public Schools Board, and Jake Smith, and he's a newcomer, if you will, to the political scene. And so you also have Johnny Cash, who most people know. He's run before, and that'll be interesting. Those are Johnny Cash, of course, is a familiar name, but hasn't held office. Mm-hmm, so he's got that. He's the only Republican. So right now, anyway, people have until next week to file. But it'll be interesting to see that primary race between Smith and Grajek. Grajek, while he's on the school board, he's on his first term, and so these are 2 young guys who you'll have to see how that kind of shapes up.
It's kind of nice to see interest, at least,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's good to see when there's primary races. There are still some county commissioners right now who are looking to run unopposed. You've got Derek King, who's looking for another term, Kathy Sue Dunn, and Carla Reynolds. Last time I checked yesterday, there hadn't been anyone who had filed.
Mm-hmm.
So county board, and that was pretty common in the last election that there were a few who ran unopposed. And, you always want to see competitive races. That's what democracy is all about.
Sure, of course. Even in these somewhat regional races, when people make a commitment to run in these races, there's still some expenditure that has to happen. There's still some attempts at name recognition and things like that, right?
Absolutely.
You see this happening.
You're absolutely campaigning. You're going to see those campaign signs, especially if it's a competitive race and you're looking at a primary. So I think you're going to see in District 3, which is here in Battle Creek, some campaign signs, some campaign events, and you're trying to get, especially if you're not well known on the political scene, you're trying to get your name out there and you're trying to get the support. You gotta get yourself out there to do that. So,
it's interesting. The county board situation is one in which there is obviously a party affiliation that a candidate declares, but generally speaking, it's not politics is not a huge part of those decisions.
No,
right?
one thing the county board has done really well, at least in my time since covering them, is they don't have much drama. They always kind of go, "Oh, I didn't see you at the meeting," and I'm like, "Well, that might be a good thing if you don't see me at the meeting." But they work really well together, at least, or they do a really good job at making the appearance that they work really well together. You don't see many split votes. And they're mostly dealing with expenses at the county level. I mean, their biggest issue is road funding,
right?
And how they're going to make those improvements. And so you might see some tension between townships and the county board, maybe. But as far as the political tension, when it comes to whether you've got a D or an R next to your name, you don't really see that at that level.
And that's nice. I think.
Yeah.
My observation is a lot of us are fatigued with all of that, particularly that which happens at the national level and how much attention that gets. But I bring that up because you take a look at Kalamazoo County right now, for example, and all the drama with their administrator and so on. Some of what I picked up over there is that there's a huge political undercurrent, which hasn't been the case in my history there. But I asked the question because I wondered about it here too, and it's not the case.
Luckily, we're not dealing with the controversy that their administrator is dealing with.
Yeah.
Kelly Scott's a pretty stable force in running the daily operations at the county, and that might help. The fact that you've got strong administration who's been there a while. You've got the county commissioners, they just work well together. Even when the newcomers come on, it's it's kind of a boring meeting.
Yep. Well, and that's okay for folks who like things like a ship to run tightly, as they say.
Right.
Yeah, and in my years just to the west, the Kalamazoo County Board was the same way. It's only recently that seems to have changed, but it's interesting to know and good to know that it seems that these things just run fairly efficiently.
Yeah.
So no city commission decisions here.
No city commission. A couple of the other races you'll see is Water Resources Commissioner. You'll see quite a primary there. Johnny Cash is actually he has filed to run for that office as well. So,
interesting.
You have only one Democrat, which is Christine Kosmowski. She's the incumbent. And a lot of the Republicans are from like rural, what you would consider rural townships. And you'll see that a lot when it comes to the water resources position. It's kind of an environmentalism versus farming and the importance of what their priorities are. And so while important, most people don't really care about the Water Resources Commissioner race, but I think it'll be one to look at because so many people have put their name in it. So.
Well, and this doesn't have much to do with city water, for example, but all the drama that has been covered in Michigan with regard to that, it makes you wonder if more attention to water in general is on people's minds.
Yeah. Well, and we have the Kalamazoo River, we've got a lot of natural resources that that office is dealing with. It's definitely an important office, but one I think that a lot of people don't understand or really pay close attention to.
Jennifer Bowman is covering elections and various races for the Battle Creek Enquirer, and we're talking about it right now. We'll back in just a moment on WBCK. For WBCK, Jennifer Bowman's here from the Battle Creek Enquirer. So no Battle Creek City Commission races this time around, but there are some other things out there. Township decisions.
Yes, you're not seeing them come in as fast as the county office filings, but you are definitely seeing some new names of what might be some interesting races. In Penfield Township, Dave Morgan which is a familiar name. He ran for 62nd District last time around.
Mm-hmm.
As a Democrat, he is now running as a Republican for supervisor in Penfield Township. You haven't seen, as far as the most recent filing online, Rob Banke, which is the incumbent, file yet, but I think that'll be an interesting race. Supervisor is always that interesting one. I mean, that's pretty much a full-time job. Emmett Township, no one has come to challenge Tim Hill, who's filed to keep his supervisor seat. But you are seeing what could be some competitive races, in the treasurer, clerk, and trustee races. Bedford Township, last time I checked, no one had filed yet, so I'll be really interested in seeing who steps up and wants to either hold on to their seat or try to get on it, because that's one of the bigger townships. But slowly coming in, a lot of the familiar names, these people have served their townships for very long times, and those are pretty common names that you'll see.
Right. It's interesting about the Morgan party switch. We were talking with Dr. Bison and Terrace Todd not long ago, who also did a party switch. Have you seen this happening a lot? Have there been undercurrents you've picked up about changing parties a lot?
Terrace Todd and Dave Morgan, I think, are the names that come to mind.
Yeah.
And they stand out because they were Democrats who ran as Democrats.
Sure.
I mean, it's one thing if, your uncle has a change of heart, growing up or something like that. But these are public people who have, Terrace Todd has held office. I mean, he was a long-time Calhoun County commissioner and a Democrat. And so it has been interesting to see that. I don't know if it's widespread, but definitely notable, those two names.
Sure. I think it's notable when that happens, as you say, especially when someone has established themselves in a certain party and then they change. It really is an interesting thing, and you don't hear too much about that, and suddenly we've heard it twice in Calhoun County.
I mean, you see it kind of at the township level, where they'll sometimes run as a Democrat, sometimes run as a Republican, and that might be having to do with an opponent or something like that, or maybe you just don't feel strongly. But, I mean, Terrace Todd and Dave Morgan were running at state office level, so it was interesting to see them change their party recently.
You mentioned the clerk race. Ann Norlander certainly has been well established in that role. Uncontested? I don't recall what you said.
She is actually going to see a primary race this year, and she has said this is the last time that she'll be running for county clerk. Deborah Evans has filed to run against her as a Republican, so we'll be seeing a primary there. That's going to be a tough race. To beat Norlander, you have to beat a long-established politician who's shown her record, and of course it's been interesting. I know there was some controversy a few months ago about the automation fund, and audit found no intentional wrongdoing, but stuff like that kind of hovers over. But she's a long-established person who hasn't really had trouble holding on to her seat, so it'll be
ran for Secretary of State years ago.
Yes, ran for that. So well-known name.
All right. And the treasurer is an uncontested race, right?
Yes. Christine Schauer is looking for a second term, and so far no one has filed against her. And actually, she came in and spoke to the Enquirer editorial board yesterday and talked about how foreclosures are down, so she's got a track record that she is going to tout, and we'll see if anyone wants to step up to the plate and run against her.
All right. And so the filing deadline is next week.
April 19th. So we'll see the final names.
Everybody want to earmark some of their savings and run and file, they can do that.
Yes.
All right, and you'll be covering that, of course, easy to follow online, too, and you are among those on the cutting edge of social media as well.
Yes, I'm on Twitter. Most of the stuff I say isn't that great, but you can find me on JENN_BOWMAN.
Do you tweet as much as Donald Trump?
No, I do not. I do not. I can't keep up with that. I also don't have a staff to help me out.
I was going to say, you don't have the...
And I'm not nearly as interesting.
You don't have a Twitter assistant to help you with those. I see. All right.
That's me.
That's fair enough. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Jennifer Bowman, Battle Creek Enquirer, 820.